All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the June 15th meeting of the Poolsville Planning Commission. On tonight's agenda, we have any announcements from the staff?
No.
Any announcements from the
I have
commissioners?
no announcements tonight.
All right. We'll go on to approval of minutes. Old business, we have the Willard project preliminary plan. We have the comp plan discussion. Wallace Montgomery will be zooming in. And we have new business regarding the food truck ordinance. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes of the May 11th meeting? Any comments, edits, suggestions?
I don't have any.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the May 11th meeting.
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And we'll move right on to old business with the Willard project preliminary plan.
Okay, John, in front of you guys, you'll see John's review letter for the revised site plan. And then I think representatives from Willard will come forward. No, you guys didn't get a copy of it. And so they want to talk about some of the changes they made since last time, and they're here for their conditional approval this evening.
Sounds good.
Good evening, and for the record, it's James Clifford from Clifford, Debilius and Bonifant, representing the Willards, along with Dave Egger from Townscape, who is the land planner, and Jeff Cenero is our engineer. So we got the whole team together in case there's any questions we hadn't answered yet. If you'd like, I'll just start. I'm going to address two things. I really thought the last session was really a great session. We learned some things that we needed to go explore, and we've done that. And I'm just going to hit the two items that I thought were most important, parking and storage, because they're related. The parking being, they wanted to, it seems like people want us to push to have more spaces. And David is going to show you a plan that takes the 2.5 per house to 3. Over 3 per lot, and then how he added it to, where he added the spaces and the way he handled that. The other thing that I thought was most compelling was the storage issue, and I did a little homework, I checked around, and I really still need to talk to Ms. Huber to see if she's got some other ideas. But what I've come to the conclusion is it's not one idea to fix storage. It's probably a series of ideas. And the three ideas that have come forward so far is to extend the length of the garage, to add a work area or a storage area. My son has this, one of my sons has this in his house, where he can pull his full-size car in, and yet there's still another 10 or 15 feet beyond the end of his car, and they use that. They put up bike racks, and they've got a lot of the things that they would have to store. It's sitting on the back wall of that garage. I think that's a great idea. We have one-car garages that and 2-car garages. So David will tell you, and that's based on, we don't know what people are going to build, but that's what we're giving them room to do. The other idea is the idea of possibly elevating the houses and doing the old-fashioned crawl space. My father-in-law had that in his house in South Carolina, and there was a door, half door, and you walked around the back of the house and you opened it up, and that's where he kept his ladders and he kept his tools, and he kept paint supplies, and all those things were kept under the house, and that way he didn't have a garage, so he didn't have it outside. And then the third way is something that another family member mentioned that they do in their neighborhood, and they have these 3-sided sheds that actually attach to the side of the house or the back of the house. So they're incorporated into the, not to the structure of the house, but they're built against the structure of the house. And then they have like a sloping roof, and they're not very large, but they're large enough to put lawnmowers and some of the outdoor stuff that people have. And so if you take those three concepts and put them all together, you start having a pretty significant storage solution that allows garages to be used. And I think we need to find a way to encourage people to use their garages. So I thought that the gentleman that came here, and I didn't write down his name. What was his name? Steve. what?
Yeah, I can't think of his last name.
Steve
Bolter,
Bolter
yeah.
had some great ideas. It really was a constructive conversation, and I think we can do things to deal with that. So having said that, Dave went ahead and took the notes on the other things that were suggested. He's going to explain what he did.
If I could just go to the plan. This plan is the updated landscape plan that's accompanying the preliminary plan and the site plan that was submitted. And what's in black, referenced in black, were changes we talked about at the last meeting. What's in blue were changes that the staff recommended prior to the last meeting. And the items that are identified in red, 8, 9, and 10, are the ones that we heard at the last meeting from this group and have been incorporated into the plan. So I just wanted to maybe focus on those three, but be happy to answer any questions. So first of all, number 8, we were asked to extend Glassway, provide a fenced, gated entrance for emergency and event use. So that's been added to the plan. That's number 8 on this plan. Number 9, we've reintroduced what were trees planted along the property line that were taken off in the last revision, so they're back on the plan. That was a request at the last meeting. And finally, number 10 was parking, which Jim talked about. At our last meeting, we demonstrated that we met the minimum parking at 158 spaces, but that included on-street parking. So we went back and looked at each lot specifically, and we have approximately 155 spaces that we can accommodate on lot. We have 10 spaces that haven't changed that are on the HOA parcels, which are the 2 parks on the north end of the property. So that's the same, so we're at 165, 2.6 per house. And then we have illustrated the parking that would go into what we're calling the Willard Commons, but parcel A1 next to the John Poole House. That's 25 spaces. We previously had, I believe it was 4 spaces on the street. We've added 3 more, so we have 7. So we have approximately 3 spaces per thousand. We add all that together. And the minimum requirement is 2.5.
So the total
new
is how-
spaces are located here and here, and then there's other spaces located on the street that haven't changed. They've been on the plan since the beginning.
So Dave, how many total spaces?
About 197,
Okay, and that,
up to, depending on the final design of each lot,
and the required is 155,
158.
158.
And that amount of spaces is including garages or not including garages?
That would include, it would probably include some of the garages, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, maybe, the on-lot spaces, maybe it's 30, 40% of the spaces, something in that order, would be garage spaces. But we're not, again, each home's gonna be designed and, provided, but we'll keep track of that as we go through the project.
Because I think Steve had a good point that, I got to thinking about the people I know that have garages, and yeah, a lot of them don't park cars in them. They're used for, even like for example, obviously we live next door, we have a garage that can accommodate a car and there's some room in front, but we typically use it for storage. We don't put cars in there except for when it snows or something like that. So, yeah, I think it's important to have plenty of alternative parking if, 50% of the people aren't utilizing their garages.
Well, we've added quite a bit, so I'm hoping that it's adequate. I really don't know how to make people park in their garage, other than making it
No, you can't.
easier for them to store things
Yeah.
elsewhere.
I just really don't want to see like people spilling over and parking on the commons because we have events and stuff and
Sure.
Understood.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? Those spaces, does that include the 25 spaces in the park there?
Yes.
So
Yes.
those would become everyday use spaces
Well,
for the
they're
community?
intended to be everyday spaces. It's just that I think we can regulate them for things like Poolsville Day and all, so that, they're freed up. I mean, it's going to be owned by the town, so you all can regulate it the way you want.
And they're
So-
excess spaces, they're above the minimum requirement.
Right, so those spaces are not everyday use for the community, though. So it really brings you closer to that 2.6 because you would have only 7 spots in addition, which
Yeah,
maybe
it
gets
would
you
be
to
around
2.7?
with, if you
Okay.
discounted those spaces. and
Right, because
discounted
those are
other-
not everyday use spaces.
Well, they are unless there's an event. Why would
Oh,
they
so
not?
so people can park there at
Yeah, well,
any
there'd be
point?
no competition for those spaces other than for events. And then for events, and I'm no expert on this, but maybe for events, that there are signage that could be used, or the homeowners association can provide regulations that say that the overflow parking for the homeowners, or for the subdivision cannot be used during special events, that kind of thing.
Mine was going to the homeowners association when
Yeah.
you first started this. What's our oversight about the HOA and the rules they can, how do we have none, right?
We have our own rules, and they have their own rules. Our rules supersede theirs, but go ahead, Jay.
I mean, that's correct how the town, but we also get to approve the HOA rules. That they've submitted some already for us, so you all get the ability to say, we're good with this or we're not. So you can work
Right.
that into it as well.
Okay.
It's required that we provide you guys a sort of a generic version of these declarations so that you can look at them as part of the package. But
Right.
I think they're going to need some fine tuning. And the documents that I've provided so far are ones that I've actually been using in other communities, and they've worked pretty well. The town has got its own specific needs, and we'll make those changes as necessary.
Yeah, I think that with, and I want to talk about the 3 ideas you had to help
Yeah.
improve storage, to free up parking areas. I think with some of those implemented, and with a good strategy with some homeowner association enforcement on what the parking requirements will be, and I think we're really moving in the right direction. Parking may be an issue, but I don't know if it's gonna be a problem, right? It's something we have to deal with, but I think if we're going at 2.7, not even including the commons parking, that's above standard. And just means I think we need a little bit tighter oversight and legislation, or whatever the word is for the homeowners' policies, I guess.
The other thing, Brian, these houses are, the work product, the product that's going to be provided, they're 2- and 3-bedroom houses. So to the extent that there's a couple that is moving out of one of the bigger communities in the area and moving into a home that's more suited to their needs, they might bring 2 cars with them. But, I mean, it's not going to have senior community restrictions.
Right.
But it's just going to be a different density as far as people in these houses. They're going to be smaller houses, and they're going to be suited for people who have small children as opposed to teenagers.
Right.
I don't know if a teenager gets, well, maybe so, I wouldn't want to speculate, but these are small houses.
Mhm.
You don't know how long people will stay there once they're there.
And
I was gonna say, with all of the electric vehicles coming out, you could definitely entice people to park in their garages if you put the charging port all the way at the back.
That's right.
that's
There you
right,
go.
Inside the
That's our
garage.
That's the 4th item on the list.
Yeah, that should be there.
right?
Also, just real quick on storage, drop down, attic space with partially floored attics, are very popular, for like Christmas things, like once a year items can go in attic spaces.
I think we have to take, so the 2 things that, I'm trying to keep seniors in mind, right? And the crawl space idea, if you're gonna elevate the house a little bit, it's gonna require steps to get in and out of the house.
No, the one in my father-in-law's house was a grade. You
Like
just
grade.
walked straight in.
Perfect,
Yeah.
it addresses that.
It wasn't 6 feet tall, it was like 4 feet tall.
Right.
You had to bend over to get in it, but
Right.
it was that grade.
And then, the attic thing, if we think seniors are gonna be attracted to this, I don't know that they're gonna be, the biggest users of attic space.
Yeah, but it's a good idea.
Yeah.
I suspect that you're gonna get some seniors, but I suspect you're gonna get a lot of starter families too over there.
Yeah.
In which case, that would be a good idea.
Yeah. One concern I had too is, just knowing how people are inherently, like, you have like a big parking lot on the western side there over by the John Poole House. Now, if someone's coming to visit people that are over like, on the eastern side of the development,
They want to park in the front yard.
they're not gonna want to walk all the way over there, especially if it's cold or it's raining or whatever. So they're gonna end up probably parking on the commons. Like, I wonder is it possible to have like some small lots, like, you know, like a little satellite lot of six or 10 spaces, like some, you know?
We looked at that, and the site's too tight right now for us to meet all the requirements and do that. But I'm wondering if signage can't regulate those kind of things. Maybe signage we don't have now in some of these lots where, like, for instance, a lot of the towns, like Old Town Gaithersburg, has signage that basically says 15-minute parking or 20-minute parking or 1 hour parking. And so nobody actually really enforces it, but it sort of sets the people's expectation that they're only going to be there a short while. But there's a lot that we're doing here. But I think it looks very good, but we're trying to do everything on site as far as regulations and meeting things, which is what we were asked to do.
But would you be totally opposed to giving up a house or two on the eastern side to turn it into some kind of a small satellite parking?
Only for the reasons I've already mentioned. We've already started to explore a lot of these. There's a lot of cost to what we're doing, a lot more than a normal subdivision. And a lot of it has to do with the community, not having to do with the development at all. It's trying to meet the needs of the community. I had asked if there was a possibility the town, on some of these common ideas, these common items, if there could be a cost sharing or some kind of return on investment for those items, the ones like the children's playground or the pathways that meet the requirement of connectivity, anything that's got really more of a community feel to it than a subdivision field. If there was some kind of cost sharing that we could do, because we really got to find a way. And I'm working very hard with Montgomery County to try to get them to understand that this product is one of the answers for them on affordable housing, but they have to do something with the impact taxes. Every one of these houses coming out of the ground would cost $60,000 just in impact taxes.
Same as a large house, basically.
Same as a large house, and that's why people don't build small houses. They're going to spend $60,000. They're going to get more bang for their buck. So the county recognizes that. I've had buy-in from both park and planning and the county commissioners' offices, the real estate staff. They get it. They understand they have to do this, and that'll be a help. That'll help us shrink this extraordinary cost to do this development. But we need to do everything we can, and that includes, much like the storage, it's a series of answers. One of them is density. The other one is impact taxes. Another one is trying to find someone who would help with some of the expenses or reimbursement of some of the expenses. It's just going to take a lot of things to make this budget work. We believe we can do it, but we can't swim against ourselves. I mean, that's a bad way. We can't work against ourselves by giving up density, because that just makes it harder.
I'll let my colleagues weigh in on that.
Yeah.
You know my thoughts on it, but the other thing related to what you were saying about storage earlier, like, you know, I have these really high hopes of this being a really cool development, and like, you know, really, really good looking lines, and like, you know, it's right in the center of town. Everyone's going to see it. I wonder if like having a little thing attached to the house where you can put the lawnmower is going to like aesthetically take away from it or not.
But typically, it's made out of the same material as the house, and it kind of blends into the house. The ones that I've seen, the one I'm looking at, I'm not talking about somebody going to Home Depot and buying a three-sided shed. It's an option, basically, that somebody would have, that they could put that on there. We're not certain that some of these houses aren't going to have basements. It really has to do with the rock, and, you know, if we start having to blast for basements, again, the project gets too expensive. So that basically eliminates basements on the sites that have rock. And there are some sites that don't, based on what we've seen. So those sites will have their own solutions by having a basement.
Yeah.
It's a give and take, but I don't think it's going to be.
These sheds would most likely be attached to the rear of the house, I would think, right?
That's correct. I would think
And
so.
everything faces the front, faces the
Yeah.
roads,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
they shouldn't be, I wouldn't imagine to be very visible.
I bet you'll be able to see some of the rears as you drive by, but you're right, it won't be
Yeah.
incredibly obvious.
As long as it melds into the house,
Yeah.
I think it'll be fine.
Yeah.
But there's a real tension here on pulling this project off and having it be affordable. Because remember, at the very least, every seller of a big piece of ground loves big houses, because the builder's going to pay them more for big house lots. We're trying to do small house lots, which already deflates the value of the land. That was something that Willard's already accepted as a done deal. Plus, they're doing everything they can to supplement the quality of it so that the builders don't pass it along to the sellers.
Right.
Or the buyers. And then on top of that, we've got some amenities and things that just are a little bit more expensive. People do grids, the things you see in common subdivisions are there because that's the cheapest way to do it. What we're doing is not that way. So we need density, and even at this, I gotta get the county to agree to the impact tax relief.
I just wanted to ask a few more questions about parking. So I guess maybe I misunderstood the parking at that Commons. I thought that that was going to be for events only and would generally not be used as parking. I don't know if that has changed or if I missed that change at some point. I thought that was only intended for like Poolsville Day or other major events where additional
I think that the
parking was
original
needed.
intent, but I think
Did it change just today or did that change
Well,
before
I mean, we
today?
basically got the impression you all would like to see more relief valves for parking, so.
Yeah.
It sort of led us to that.
The only thing, my major concern is that pathway was intended to keep a visual sightline to
Yes,
John
it's still
Pool.
there, yeah.
And it will, but there's going to be cars all along that view between here and John Pool then. Because that parking is right there, correct?
Mhm.
Like by that path? Personally, I would rather not have those spaces there as a regular use. I mean, and I do hear what you're saying with the impact fees and, and I'm totally with you there.
Mhm.
But, I mean, I also agree with Martin that there's not a lot of parking up towards the top. Like if lot 38 or 39, which are to the left oval by the pathway there between the two pocket parks, if one of those could be kind of made into smaller parking there, you have that entire back half covered for parking almost, if you had a few spaces there.
There are spaces on the oval.
Yeah.
There's spaces on the exterior of the oval and the interior of the oval.
We have surplus
There's like 10
parking.
guest parking spaces in that one area already.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking if you have 2 or 3 bedroom homes, I'm just thinking about everyone in Poolsville. Like my neighborhood, most people have at least 2 kids. I have a neighbor with 3 kids. Every single person in their house has a car.
Yeah, but I
I
just
mean-
don't see this community as being that sort of community, Amanda, because I really don't
I
think.
hope. Yeah, maybe.
I mean, the whole idea was to downsize this thing so
Right.
it doesn't have to play by the same rules as the Kettler development does.
I mean, there's guest, just
Yeah.
walk through a little bit.
Yeah.
There is guest parking here, 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 introduced here, and here, and, I believe that there's other spaces that are existing in here. Obviously.
I hate to make you do it again, but will you do it again, but just tell me approximately how many spaces in each of those spots? Just so I can get an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 4 spaces here.
Okay.
That are off-lot guest parking. There's 8 spaces here, I think I said 10 previously, so 8 spaces here. There are 3 spaces here, 2 spaces here, 3 spaces here, 2, I believe there's 2 here, I don't remember, but, a little hard to see. And 2 spaces here. So those are all, open to anyone who wants to park here as a guest. And as, like Jim said, they can be regulated, the signage or something along those lines if necessary.
I mean, you all could actually, you're gonna own that space. If you put signs up that say, John Pool parking only here, you know how often they're gonna use that, and, there's just not that many events, so that would basically stay open all the time. If you wanna put signs here that say, not available during major events, or, whatever restriction is you wanna put in there, you guys can regulate what gets done there. But
Could I jump in there for a second? Yeah, definitely. That is gonna be park property, that we're gonna own it, so we can treat it like the rest of our parks, no overnight parking period. We can put a gate on it, we can do whatever we want to with it. And we probably would, it would be closed at nighttime. Typically, all our parks are. That's the regs and rules as they are written now, so.
But
So you're saying that that it probably will be a special events parking?
Right, we first talked about it, we said it would be for, somebody could have a birthday party and want people to park there. John Poole could have an event going on, people could park there. Maybe Locals has a special event going on. So we talked about all that initially when this whole thing was started, so.
That's actually a great idea. If you're living in this subdivision and you're gonna have an event that you think is gonna bring more cars in than is normal, you could call the town and say, look, we'd like to reserve some spaces in the commons.
They didn't have to call us. It happens now with every one of our parks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a
Yeah.
common occurrence.
And I think that's maybe the confusion between daily use, just,
Yes.
it's everyday use, anybody can use it at any time during the day, but it's a park that will be closed at night.
We think for daily use, we're providing adequate without that.
Yeah.
Over the required amount.
Yeah. No, and for,
You were talking about delineating. The space is also right there where Amanda was worried about it going through there.
Yeah,
I don't think you need to delineate any spaces whatsoever. This is gonna be a parking lot that has the stones in it that grass grows up through it,
That's
right?
correct.
So
Yeah, it's
I don't know
gonna be a
why you
lawn.
would delineate anything at that point.
yeah, yeah.
Really don't. That way you wouldn't have people parking there. I mean, it wouldn't even be an issue.
I have the same concept on my farm, right out in front of my dairy barn. We park, well, not only do Billy Willard's heavy equipment and things as we're farming, but whenever we have an event there, people park on what they think is our lawn, but it's got number 2 stone underneath. It drains beautifully, and, we can put 50 cars on there, and then when they leave, it just looks like a lawn again. And that's what the intention is out here.
Yeah.
What point do we talk about the streetscape portion of this?
Right now we can.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. There'll be a landscape plan that comes through, but typically it comes right off of the preliminary plan, so.
Should we let them know what we're looking for in that portion of Fisher Avenue?
Well, we've read the,
Yeah, they know exactly. That's actually on the plan.
Okay,
Everything,
you
the
have-
sidewalk,
Yeah.
everything
We've
is.
included.
Yep, a requirement.
We understand to be
Okay.
streetscape improvements.
your vision is already implanted
Okay, cool.
in this design.
There's a sitting area, asphalt path, the pathway and everything. I mean, all that's in the plan. You can
Yeah.
anticipate it. They're shown on
Yep,
the
they're all
plan.
in there. So all this will be concreted in when we do the public improvement agreement, which you guys will actually be a part of
It
also.
also comes in the final plan when we do the photometrics of it.
You have your fingerprints all over this thing. Every time you guys have met and decided to do something you wanted to see done in town, it's in there.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I can see that there's a lot of stuff you've done to accommodate. I'm just, the parking thing kind of worries me, and I wonder if it doesn't make sense to wait, do a little more research on it to see what typical use is on these kind of things, like how many people.
My only thought of that is they exceed what the requirements of the regulations are right now.
We'll be happy to keep talking to you about this issue. We think we've addressed it. I think that when this development is finally built, it's going to be clear that it's not a problem, but sometimes things aren't a problem until they are a problem, and we'll talk about it. But we've got to keep the project moving after all this time,
But I understand that they meet the requirements, but since this is the overlay zone, it's kind of like a whole new thing, right? Like, I mean,
No, they received the overlay zoning for the requirements of what they did for the proposal for the concept plan.
okay.
And so they've received that. They have that, the zoning has changed. But, so Jay, you can also weigh in too, but they've exceeded, not only met the requirements, they've exceeded the requirements.
Yeah, there's no new variation or, subjective kind of thing that once you gave them that, they meet those standards. And this exceeds that. You can address the manner, which is what you've been trying to do. You're saying, hey, how can we address how you're going to meet those requirements? But, a lot of this is a down the road thing because they're gonna give that to the town, as we've been saying, and then the town figures out how to meet its needs of the citizens at some point in time. Because it comes down to almost property at that point. You're giving us this, town, you better make use of it. I mean, for example, if the town found that parking was horrible and the citizens said that you need to do something, you'd take town property and turn it into a parking lot. Maybe 50 years from now, whatever. But you can't kind of hold the developer responsible for future things if it looks like the needs are met based on the standards you've established.
What would be the feasibility of taking that lot over in the, by the John Poole house that's got 20, 24 spaces, whatever, and I'm just thinking out loud here, so bear with me. Yeah. Like taking that lot and cutting it in half and putting the other half on the other side of the development on the eastern side, just so that the
This was negotiated with John Poole House and with the Parks Department. Everybody really loved this idea of this commons here, I'm calling it the Willard Commons. And we've gone ahead and faced all, these are all porched homes that are gonna look out on these commons. So we've tried to meet a lot of the vision of different people by creating this. I just don't think splitting it in half is gonna give them the same result that they've asked for.
Well, I'm not talking about splitting the park portion of it, like the commons portion of it. I'm just thinking, and again, I'm just thinking out loud.
It is all commons, though. I mean, this, unless somebody's parking there, it
Right.
looks like grass.
Right.
I mean, if you're gonna come out here and play with a Frisbee, you're gonna be running across there just like you would here. It's all gonna be grass.
Okay.
I honestly, I can't disagree with you that there's an issue about whether or not this parking idea is gonna work completely, but it's as good as we can do, and it's a whole lot better than what's required. I'd love just like to move forward on that, and if the time comes that more has to be done, there are areas that are being dedicated that might give an answer down the road, but I just don't think we can't lose sight of the fact that these homes are not the same homes that have been built in this town up till now. They're different. Yeah.
Trying to, think everything through and cover our what's, like,
Right.
to try to think of every contingency and every
I think we've done.
possibility, because, this is, like, as you've said, this is a signature development. It's right in the center of the town.
Well,
It's
if
gonna
we-
be like
if
the
we
pride
can
of Poolesville to some extent.
I got the impression from, was it Steve that sat next to me? Yeah, Steve, that he felt the storage issue drove the parking issue. And if you solve the storage issue, that some of the parking issue goes away, and that's what we're gonna try to do. That's something we could deal with. And then we did the best we could to give you extra parking. I just don't know what else we can do at this point.
If this goes through as is, and like for some reason, everyone's parking on this side that wants to go to the, places on the eastern side of the development, we could always there's like in case of emergency break glass scenario, we could always build a small parking lot to some of the parkland. Is that what you're saying?
I didn't say that. I said that.
You said that, okay.
What I guess I see in other places is that's town property. And so eventually, if you decide that you need to do something different with the town property, you can do that. But that's not a today thing, and you can imagine that. A lot of the places we deal with this is like the age-restricted communities, and they limit parking on the street because they have to maintain the streets. And so when they put the no parking signs up on one side or both sides, and they enforce it, the residents know I got to park in the driveway or I got to park in the garage. And if that's not going to work for me because I have 5 kids and cars, I can't live here because it's just not going to happen for me. And at some point in time, you can't do a one-size-fits-all for that. So,
That was my thought too. If it became a problem, they were parking over here on the commons or something, enforcement will make them come back into their driveways or their garages.
I guess we put signs that say parking for commons only or something.
Right,
Yeah.
event parking, whatever, exactly.
And I would make one more point. I would hate the subdivision to look like a parking lot. I really think the garages help serve that the result. So anything we can do to get people the incentive to be in their garage makes the overall subdivision look better. Adding more parking areas just makes it look like a car parking lot. If I have a choice, or if I don't have a choice, that's what I'm gonna do. So if I don't have a choice, I'm gonna park in my garage. We just gotta make sure the house is given the options.
I think that those are really good points, and I think you guys have really done a nice job coming up with creative ways to increase storage. I really do appreciate that. I think that that's really important. I just want to say that if that's a town lot, I really don't think that should be constantly open to parking. I just think that that's going to look terrible because you're going to see it from the street. You're going to
Constantly is when the park's open, not at
right,
night.
but that's every day of the week, sunrise to sunset. So let's say in the summer, that's until 9 o'clock at night, right? It's a big chunk of the day. And the main part that people are going to want to park at probably isn't the field so much as the playground, which they would use the common spots for because you would have to. There's no parking near the playground. It's one of the few parks that don't have a large parking lot close to it.
You have a parking lot right there.
Right, well, that's what I'm saying. You'd have to use the commons lot.
Yeah.
The only other one I could think of was Tama 2, when I was thinking through parking lots today, and parks in town. Having a young kid, you know where where there's parking and where there's not, where you're going to go to, where you're not. Who is that?
Brooks.
That's true. Yep, that's true.
Just thinking, how do you envision it working if it's not going to be open during the day?
Like that parking lot, I feel like should be for special events or something that, like, I don't know.
That was
I-
the
That's how
I
it
will
was originally
say-
proposed.
I-
Daily parking, something of that. Is that you're getting to, like,
Yeah.
just so it's not overused by somebody every day? Okay, I got you.
But I hear what you're saying and I hear your concern, but I also know as someone who walks nearly every square inch of this town on the daily, there's never more than 2 to 3 cars in any given lot for parking unless there's like a play date happening. And there's very short periods of time. I hear the concern about the parking. I don't see the problem until maybe 10, 15 years in the future. And the only reason I think parking may be a problem then is if you get these families who move in who then have 1, 2 kids, 10, 15 years down the road, they need to add another vehicle. Like that's when I see maybe you have a vehicle problem. But these 12, 15, 1,800 square foot homes are not going to attract 3-car families. They're not. I just don't see that. They might not even attract 2-car families. Like, I don't see it being a problem even in the next 10 years. But that's my personal thought on the parking. Like, you've met and exceeded the parking requirement, and I think that the requirement was based on good information, and it would have been sufficient.
Unless I'm wrong, this is probably the first real urban product that's been put into Poolsville. And if you go to other urban areas, like for instance, I've done developments in Old Town Gaithersburg, we don't even have the same parking requirements as everybody else because it's an urban product. They just anticipate people are getting on trains and subways and buses, and parking requirements are greatly reduced, slashed in half and sometimes even more. And that's even true for the schools, the impact on schools. They just see a 1 and 2 and 3 bedroom houses as having far less impact. Same thing with water use, far less impact. It's just a different product, and we're all trying to put the standard on this subdivision that we're used to, and it's going to be different.
And the bottom line is we're meeting the parking standard that's throughout the entire community, that you've applied to every other project in the community, and we're exceeding it. And we're providing some parking that will be event only
Yeah.
for celebrations and maybe some special event where they get the town to allow use of it. That's in addition to that. So we're exceeding the minimum, and we're applying the same suburban standard, despite the fact we're right in town. That any other subdivision outside of town is, or on the edge of town, is being applied.
Well, just to circle back for a minute, it's, with the town regulating that, the commons parking there, you all could do what I mentioned before, which is basically if somebody calls and asks if they can use the parking area in the commons for a particular event, you guys could say yay or nay, right? I mean, otherwise it's kept free of cars, unless it's either a special event the town's putting on or a pre-approved event that an individual's put on. And our original vision, that when Billy and I first started talking this with Dave, it was that this was going to look like somebody's lawn until
Yeah.
there's a special
Yes,
event.
yeah.
I can, yeah, I mean, the only drivers I was thinking after your comment, Amanda, might be if locals gets really popular and, you know, but that's they're kind of weekendish based anyway.
I don't know, I cut off this week, and there's a lot of people there for breakfast and lunch. I was kind of
That's good.
But
surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, pleasantly surprised.
They're parking in the Jameson property.
Yeah,
Oh, right.
Yeah,
they've got that whole area back there.
yeah,
It's very good, by the way, isn't it?
it is.
Yeah.
So, and I think we can have this discussion without having to weigh on the decision on the plan, right? I mean, we can decide as a town how we want to enforce the parking there.
It's our property.
Yeah. So it doesn't really have to be part of the approval of the comprehensive plan discussion.
We'll figure it out after it's built,
Yeah.
knowing that's an issue that has to be addressed.
Yep.
So what would be the next step? So that, will you all come to us if we move forward tonight and say, this is what we're thinking for, you know, what the homes are gonna look like, and we can give you feedback on that?
We're happy to do that.
Okay.
We don't have a builder yet.
I'm saying once you do though.
Yeah, we're designing in our own offices what we think this community ought to look like house-wise, but really until preliminary plan, site plan is approved, because we don't want builders to get their fingerprints on this thing until you guys have decided you've got what you want. Then we're gonna start meeting with builders, and at that point, architecture and design and all that will be a more meaningful conversation than having it with.
But that's a conversation we can still have.
I think it's definitely a conversation. It's not really gonna be an approval or denial, if it makes sense, because you don't approve aesthetics and designs.
But
Right, is that right,
you
Jack?
know, we're open to having dialogue about
Yes.
things, so we will do that.
I think part of this was the fact that it was the community village, and there was an expectation laid out in a concept, not exactly.
Right.
And so, you know, you're seeing that with this part of it, and the next phase will be
Yeah.
what is gonna be built out of it with elevations. So they're gonna come in and say, just so you know, this what follows the concept, don't you think? And
Right, but they do have requirements of front porches and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
That still holds,
Yeah,
right,
you-
so the
You
still,
need to look
that
at our
stuff does.
declaration of restrictive covenants, because it hardwires in what we say has to happen.
I just really want to make sure that the you came with, I think it was 4 concepts
Right.
that you showed us, and you know, obviously it's not going to look exactly like that.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of those concepts are, I think probably all 4 of them are really, really nice looking.
Right.
And I'd love to see them look, you know, like as close to that as possible. And I just don't want, you know, have you come in with like a box that's like not aesthetically pleasing or whatever.
What might be a good idea is I've found a couple communities where not every house, but a number of the houses in there are sort of what we're looking at. If anybody wanted to do a field trip, I'd be happy to go or meet you or whatever you want to do and show you the kind of things that we're talking about. Some of them are in Washington Grove, some of them are in Gaithersburg area. We haven't found a lot in Clarksburg or Germantown that fits the mold, but we have found them in Virginia. And we have pictures of things. I've got a guy sending me, the guy that was one of the main architects or land planners, sorry, Dave, of Kentlands, was a guy named Mike Watkins, and I had breakfast with him this morning. Sorry, Dave. And we just talked about, you know, I was there in the tent when they were trying to dream up Kentlands. I was part of that whole process in Gaithersburg. And we talked and laughed about that. And I said what we were trying to do here, and he got excited about it. And he said, well, I'm going to send you some things to look at. He doesn't do architectural work. He doesn't build houses or anything. But he's going to send me some things that he's seen done in this kind of a scenario. And he talked about, I forgot what country, I think it was in the Netherlands. And he had a word for it. There's a term that they use over there for the kind of house. It's conceptually what we want, but it's very kind of Russian, you know, gray stark boxes. I said, no, that's not what we're looking for. But the concept's the same. It's small homes that are more affordable and, you know, more practical for all levels of income. So I'm going to look at those. Maybe the interiors will mean something. I've walked through 3 or 4 homes 2 weeks ago that Mitchell and Best did. And Dave has been in contact with them to look at footprints and how because our lots won't, you know, accommodate. We did that intentionally. Our lots don't accommodate big houses. So if you don't have the product to fix the lot, this isn't the place for you to come. So we have a lot of work. There's a lot of heavy lifting to do once we leave here. But we committed to ourselves, and Billy was adamant, that he wanted to get through the preliminary plan process, site plan process, know exactly what has been approved before we sit down and start talking to builders. And whether it's formally or informally, I'm happy to share that information as we go. You're not going to be disappointed. I think we've already demonstrated it, which is as important to us as it is to you guys, that this get done
They
right.
look like those concepts you showed us at one time.
Yes.
I won't be disappointed.
Right.
Yeah, and,
Nice.
Right.
and just to remind you that this preliminary plan is a 4-sheet set, and part of that set includes some architectural guidelines that
Yeah.
were in the concept plan or carried forward into the preliminary plan. And we're also showing which lots are gonna have porches, and we've allocated the porches are required at the 2 parks, so that you're gonna have front porches on both parks. And you're gonna have, the minimum required front porches along Fisher Avenue. And so that information is in the plan to the extent we were able to give you architectural information at this point.
I'd like to think that every group we met with can look at this plan and see their fingerprints and see that we haven't overlooked any of the things that we said we would do. I don't see us changing the architecture approach now that we've gone through this much trouble.
Any other items for discussion? Anybody ready to make a motion?
What are we moving? What's the motion?
If you wanted to approve this, it'd be, approve the preliminary, conditionally approve the preliminary plan.
What's it, but just for, I can't remember, what's the condition?
So it's gonna be conditioned on that, with Montgomery County stormwater,
Stormwater.
any road change, anything that may change this plan, that's conditioned upon those outside agencies.
Right.
Well, I will make a motion to approve the plan conditionally based on the conditions outlined by John Strong's letter. Of approval.
I feel like I'm not there to, I don't know why, I'm just having, I don't know. I feel like for me, like my house in Elizabeth Lake is listed as under 2,200 square feet.
Mhm.
We have a 4-bedroom home. Obviously, the basement must not be included in that square footage when we bought. But I will tell you that just in our house, we have 3 cars, and we have a toddler. I mean, I do think parking is gonna be a problem, because if we're at 1,200 to 2,000 square foot homes, 2,000 square foot is not much different from my home. My home is large. My home is not small. And I do hear that you're above the conditions.
I will just say that basements are not included in GLA, gross living area. That is not part of, and any like bed bath counts would not be considered below grade. So.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, I feel like that's,
But there would only be a few houses that would, I think, would be on the larger end. I don't know for sure, but for the people that we're building these houses for, I don't think they're gonna be looking for the larger house. They're gonna be looking for the smaller house. We were only gonna go with 2 bedrooms, and I actually, Commissioner Radigan said that he thought that it would be a better community if we added a 3rd bedroom. Yeah, and that's what that's where we went. We've done everything we can, and we have the perfect owners to do that. And after all these years and all this effort, I would really like to think we could get through preliminary plan approval and get to work on this thing.
I'll also just say that, I don't know that we can hold this plan up because they meet the requirements of the parking. And we now have a little bit of control going forward on how we implement the usage of some of the parking, and if we need to do something else, and that's within the town's purview to do something with signage or whatever it takes. We also have the homeowners association that we can lean on to enforce some parking restrictions. There's no reason the homeowners association can't say you can only have two or three cars.
And we can tell them what, we can dictate to them what the terms are gonna be, right?
Right.
To the homeowners association, we can tell them,
Work with them.
you can require parking here, you can't, whatever.
You're going to be able to review the bylaws that they're going to have, and then it'll never be the homeowners association that you'll deal with. You'll deal in the
Okay.
formulation of this,
Gotcha.
and then that will be it at that point in
And
time.
then what happens going forward if, we agree to one set of rules, and then we realize that like, okay, like, we need to switch things around because the parking during certain hours isn't working, whatever. Can we go in and negotiate with the homeowners association at that
The only
point?
one we're gonna be able to control would be the parking on our property.
And
And
we
you never
couldn't,
lose that.
Which includes the streets.
Yeah, it includes the streets
These are
also.
public streets.
Yeah.
we couldn't change anything, like if the homeowners association went in and we agreed with the foundational terms of it, and then a new board comes into the HOA and they change those rules, there's nothing we can do as a town.
Well, you can't just do that.
Right.
If you're going to try to change declaration of covenants, usually typically, unless the document says otherwise, you need 100% of the owners, because they bought with the expectation that those rules will be enforced. And if they're not being enforced, or if they're trying to be changed, then you need everybody to agree to that. Sometimes it's a majority or 2/3, but typically you can write the covenant so that it says you can't make changes.
And they're recorded in the land records.
They're recorded in the land record, so every person that buys,
Change, it's very difficult to do.
yeah. You,
I mean,
understand.
they run with the land, but, I mean, coming back, like, to try to step back on this, I know that we're saying there may be a parking issue. Who is that issue for? Is it for the homeowner, that they're not gonna have enough places to park their cars? Or is it for the community because they don't want cars parked all over the place? So it depends on how you look at this. So if it's the community, we control the roads. We can post no parking signs on both sides of the roads. I mean, people can complain, but we could do that. There's no cars are gonna park in the road. So you're gonna have to find some place else to park your car. Well, you think you're gonna drive over to our park, the community park, we'll say that's not gonna work for us, and you're not gonna do those things. So if you think you're gonna have a 5-car family, you're gonna have a problem living here. Now, if you're the owner, that might be a problem for you as an individual. This might not be the place to live, but it's almost like a townhouse, or the old townhouses, where you have your space and maybe an extra space, and that's it. Maybe there's some community spaces that you fight over, but, the concerns with those areas are they pampering their boat or their camper or things like that? That's not gonna be allowed here. There's no spots for doing that. There's no community spots for doing that.
Yeah, it's in the covenants, none
So-
of that is allowed in this.
So that's why I guess like at the parking, is it an issue for the people that will buy there? Because when you get there and you realize, well, I mean, maybe you don't think that far ahead, but am I not gonna have places to park the Corvette I never drive in the car, and then I got 2 in the driveway, and that's it? Or is it a problem for all of us who were gonna say, well, no, that wasn't the deal going in, and we're not gonna allow parking like that? That's,
I envision it being more of a, we have 2 cars, they're both in the garage, we're having someone over for Christmas dinner or something like that, and, we have 15 guests coming in 15 different cars, and they guess they have to just find their own parking at that point.
and if they parked on the street and we had to take enforcement, I mean, is it a birthday party, a graduation party? You should be tolerant of those types of things. But if that's where the kids are gonna park their car because they just turned 16, well, then you're not too tolerant of that. And if they say, well, we're gonna park in the lawn, not tolerant of that. We've had that in other places there. So, I mean, I guess it's like the community that you're trying to set up, and you're setting this community up so that it's not gonna be a lot of area, so it'll limit. It's just not gonna limit, it's gonna limit itself because people, if they're smart about doing it, they're gonna say, there's no place. I guess like to your point with like the 4 bedrooms, you got a house that you can grow into. Whereas like my sister lives in a row house in Frederick, and when she had her family, she didn't have
They
any
moved.
parking at all. She's gonna be like, when it's time to do this, I gotta move to another place, and that was always part of the deal, so.
Yeah, my kids did the same thing. They lived in Baltimore, they lived in Annapolis, and when they outgrew the house, they moved. When they had started having kids, that house wasn't for them anymore. And that's the way it'll be here. I mean, I'd like to think it's not gonna turn into a completely senior community. I'm not prejudiced with seniors. I still think that the idea of the mixture is a good thing.
I guess there's parking, people can park over on Glassway, there's street parking over there too.
I was gonna say, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't we have a parking issue, after the new townhouses were built on the corner of Fisher and Wooten? And the town completely like went in and they were like, no, we're going to make this all grass. It's not going to be a parking lot anymore. Like the town fixed that sort of eyesore parking issue and people were like, oh, I guess I have to park in my own parking spots. Like,
They did comply.
yeah. Like I know that we've had parking issues before and the town has successfully, at least in that case that I know of, addressed that issue.
John Strong, you think this is all good to go, the parking thing, not a concern for you?
Not a concern at this point, no. Based upon the type of community it is planned to be.
Who's gonna second it? Who wants to decide? I can't. So you guys.
Where's Kevin when you need him?
Seconded.
Thank you.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much. We're not going away. We'll have more conversations.
Thank
We
you.
live here.
Thank you for entertaining additional discussion too. I appreciate that. Sorry.
Can I ask what we've just been approved? I know it's preliminary plan, but is it,
You have additional preliminary plan approval.
okay.
That includes the
So, site plan and all that we just talked about, that'll all be coming. We'll be finishing that. Okay.
contribution.
It's all in there.
Oh, great. Is this for us?
Preliminary plan, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I think much like the folks in Kentlands, in the city of Gaithersburg, 34 years later, they're still doing tours for people around the country to see Kentlands because it was such an award-winning community. I really like to think that that's going to happen here. It's going to be an award-winning community, and you'll all be proud.
Got
of it.
one up Kentlands, right?
Got a one-up Kentlands. That's right.
So you're saying you see more cars here, just some people touring? Is that
No. Buses.
buses?
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Clifford.
Thank you. See you, Billy, thanks for coming.
Are we ready with Zoom or should we move on to,
No, Lauren's been waiting and these things went dead on her.
TV's not on. I feel like normally that one's
Yeah.
on for us to be able to see.
All right, Lauren, are you there?
Hi, yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can't see you, but we can hear you.
Great. So I am unfortunately having some technical difficulties on my side. My connection to our office network keeps cutting in and out, and I am unable to connect to Zoom through that network. So I can't pull up the actual presentation we had planned for this evening. I can walk through the visioning event that we held, and then once I'm able to get the connection issue worked out, I can send those documents over to everyone along with the full summary write-ups of that event. I apologize for this issue.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do we have, are we up against the deadline here? Or would it make more sense just to have her present next month?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, we can go ahead and wait till next month. That's fine. Was there any other discussion points we needed to talk about, interviews and things of that nature?
Based in conversations that we've had with the town manager, it sounds like Danny Embrief with the Sustainability Committee is the one person that has been identified as wanting a stakeholder interview, but we wanted to confirm whether there were any others in the community that you thought it would be appropriate for us to hold those interviews with, and then we'll go ahead and get those scheduled and have those discussions, and then presumably we'll be able to bring those results of those back to you next month as well. And in the meantime, we've been working on some chapter narrative drafting, so we'll be able also, to continue incorporating results of the visioning event and anything that we do hear from the stakeholder interviews into those, and we'll be able to lay out a calendar of when those different drafts will be coming to you for review.
Okay, that'd be nice if we could get that in advance of the next meeting also, so we could all take a look
Sure.
at it and have our questions ready and
Yeah, totally.
what our expectations will be.
Definitely, we can do that.
Okay.
Wait, they've interviewed most of the people that they need to interview, right? I mean, Danny Embry wants to
He's the
talk
only
to
one that
him.
came forward and said he wanted to, and we were gonna have a discussion, is there somebody else maybe we thought may warrant?
But I mean, they refresh my memory. They've talked to most of the stakeholders, right? Like they've heard from, or we've heard from.
We've heard
We have,
from.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
I-
yes.
And on that note, actually, Martin, I think I might like them to talk to Link Hoeing. I
Okay.
was impressed with some of the ideas and concepts he had when he discussed, and I can't remember exactly what they were, so it'd be good to get those.
Well, I mean, is it worth having them, Wallace Montgomery, go, to like all the stakeholders, like HMD, the seniors, even though we've already done it?
For me, my thought was that Link really came with something for us, and everybody else was kind of like, what do you want us to tell you? And I feel like we got the feedback they had. We had a good discussion, but I don't know, there's something more depth to what Link was giving us. And there might have been somebody else that I'm not thinking of too. There's just-
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the meetings that we had that involved the comments from like Sustainable Poolsville and Poolsville Green and all that are available online. So unless they're bringing new information, I'm not sure that it makes sense to tie up a resource just to repeat something that you could watch on your own time online. Now, I do agree that Link did have a lot. I didn't write any of them down. It might be nice to get, more input that's in addition to, but I'm not sure if it's just reiterating what we've already seen, that it makes sense.
So
I al-
Lauren, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I also wonder if you would get different information in like a structured interview, because I will say, like I used to do with teachers, a survey of like how things went, and then we would have the researcher on staff contact each person and do a 15-minute interview, and I got so much more useful information from that than I did from anything teachers self-reported. So, and like a lot of people, when they came to us, they were like, well, what do you want me to present?
Yeah.
They didn't know what to bring.
So if
So
they
I'm
ask
wondering
their
if like
prompted, they might give different-
somebody from PAC might be really important, the Chamber of Commerce, or like I just think that there's a very different information you can get from somebody who actually knows how to conduct an interview. Like
Great point.
That's true.
none of us really know how to do that.
So Lauren, you had an opportunity to take a look at all the narratives that were written as far as the testimony from the different groups, right?
Yes, we do. We have copies of all of that material. It's been a little while since I've read through it, and we had actually attended at least one meeting where it was presented directly to you all. But I agree, if it's just reiterating the information from those, I wouldn't want to expend the project budget on something where we're just reiterating that type of information. So if you think it's worthwhile, we can take another look at those, and if there are specific questions that triggers, we can reach out to those parties with those specific questions. We just wanted to confirm whether there were any other parties that you think it would be beneficial to reach out to, or since you've had those discussions, if any other questions or specifics on your part have come up. One thing to keep in mind is that obviously the plan will go back, will be available to the public for the public as a whole to review and comment, which of course includes the members of the various organizations, committees, boards, and whatnot. So even if we don't move forward with any specific interviews or re-interviewing anyone, there will be the opportunity for them to review a draft of the plan and provide comment at that time as well.
I wonder if it might be useful then to send the notes out to the people who testified before, testified's not the word, but who came and presented before, and ask them, do you have new information to provide or anything that would be relevant at this point? Additionally, Lauren, it might be helpful if you could identify like 5 of the big themes that came out through the visioning event and through the surveys, and maybe somebody from those 5 areas or something comes and does a structured interview, because that might be worthwhile.
Like Lauren, give us like 5 questions to go back to each stakeholder with. I mean, 'cause I do feel like those interviews didn't provide a lot of information, and I think it's not their fault. I mean, they kind of didn't really understand what they're being asked or whatever. So I wonder if Lauren, if it would make sense if there's like a set of questions to prompt them, like, maybe not like an actual interview, but just something we could forward on. Hey, we got your testimony. Here's some, if you have any additional information, here's some, things that we're looking for. Something like that.
Sure, we can certainly do that, and we've done that in other communities as well, where rather than doing a like a phone call or one-on-one interview, we set up a questionnaire that's either a general questionnaire with the same 5 or so questions that go to every party, or there may be 1 or 2 similar questions, and then some detailed questions again that are following up on information that we've heard previously, or something that's more specific to that entity's area of what their area of focus is. And then that way the person can either email us back with comments, or after they receive the questions, we can set up a time to talk after that, however it works out best to move forward with that. So that's something that we're completely comfortable doing and handling in that fashion.
Do you guys agree with me that might be a useful?
I'd like to see her suggestion for some questions. Maybe she can send that to us via email.
Yeah.
and to which groups. If you think a templated one with the same questions is what we need, Lauren, that's fine as well. We'll just look at it and make some comments or give it a thumbs up and send it. There's no harm in doing that.
Yeah, because it'll only be like icing on the cake. I mean, we've already heard a little bit from them.
Yep.
And now we can get targeted information, exactly what we're looking for, rather than saying, you tell us what's on your mind.
Agree.
Yeah, I think the chamber would be the only one that would be out, be another one that
I know
could.
HMD kind of didn't, they were kind of like, why are we?
Well, I mean, no, she said she didn't have anything new. I think she knew what was going on. She said, I like the way our current comprehensive plan is written. We've gotten good support from the town. We want to make sure that continues.
But it sounds to me, if we have a template of 4, 5, 6 questions or whatever, it's pretty easy to just send it out. If they send it back, they do. If not, we already have testimony from them.
Right, especially since Lawrence had an opportunity to take a look at the
Yeah.
the narratives that came in. She knows if there's any holes in it that we need to fill
Yep, that sounds
So
great.
then the 2 interviews on top of that, Danny and Link.
and link.
Yep.
And do we want to talk about the Poolsville Area Chamber of Commerce as well, somebody from there, just because business generally has been a pretty big theme in our comprehensive plan in the
Let me-
past. I don't know if it's one of the current large
Let me
themes.
reach out to them. Who came in? I think I was gone when
Tom Kettler,
Tom came. Is he still the one?
he is no longer the president, but he's still voice.
Okay. Well, I'll reach out to the chamber.
Okay. Good. Good. Yeah, great.
No, I totally agree. I think Amanda is spot on the nose, though, that, we're probably beyond more general presentations, and that targeted and more direct sort of information digging is appropriate at this point. Yeah.
Yep, good.
Okay, well, we can compile that template with the questions and get that turned around fairly quickly, so you all have a chance to look at it. And then as soon as we get the okay, or any adjustments are made to those, we'll get those finalized and sent out to the appropriate parties.
Okay, I'll be in touch with you tomorrow too, Lauren.
Okay,
This is
wonderful.
Wade
Thank
talking,
you.
by the way.
And again, I sincerely apologize for this technology glitch here.
Okay, no worries.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
All right, anything else to discuss on the comprehensive plan tonight? I didn't think so. We'll move on to new business with the food truck ordinance.
Okay. This has been on the burner for a while. And when I came back, Jay said this is one thing we need to tackle. There's some food trucks that have been using different lots of stuff and really with no zoning authority or anything, no rules or anything to go by. So what we did, we put together some basic things. This has to be put into an ordinance form, but I wanted to bring it to you guys. And so we looked at several different ordinances from all over the place, and we kind of cut and fit to make them fit what we thought was the best fit for Poolsville. And so that's what you see here. And, we talk about temporary use permit is what it's going to be called, so we don't want anybody, it's really unfair for the restaurants if their food truck is there because they have to go through so many hoops and things to get approved and pay fees and everything else. So the food trucks should also have to be regulated. Right now, we don't know if they have health department approval, anything like that. So this is going to put the safety aspect, for the community in the forefront also.
Do we, because I know it's Montgomery County that does the health inspections.
They do.
Do we require that restaurants have them in town?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we do, absolutely. Occupancy permit, they have to have it
Yep.
to get that. So we've laid out some basic rules here and everything from, trash cannot accumulate to safe access for pedestrians to come up into it. Each year, the owner-operator would have to come and get a new permit. So you're making sure it's renewed each year, and that gives us an opportunity to make changes to the regulations if we need to, if something's not working out. Obviously, the property, so this is all for private property also. We're not talking about being on the streets or anything like that. It has to be on private property unless it's a special town event, which we regulate it for Poolsville Day or for all the commons and things like that. Exactly. We don't want them to operate 6 days or 7 days a week, every day. So we're only going to allow them to operate 6 hours a day, between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m., and only, I believe it's 4 days a week. That way we know that they're not there full-time, taken away from any restaurant business establishment. So these are all just items that we can talk about. This what we came up with, we thought was the best fit for us in Poolsville. And then there's safety things, being on level access, have to have trash receptacles, have to have health department approval. So anything else you want to add, Jay? I mean, this is kind of the basic of what we put together.
Are any of these, I'm sorry, Jay, I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead.
Do we anticipate any of these affecting either of the current, I think it's 2 food trucks we have now, Tony's and Brewster's? Will any of these rules, like the Brewster's, or Tony's is only open 4 days a week anyway, right? Or is it 5 days a week?
Right now, he's just open a couple of days because has another venue somewhere else that he's been going
Okay.
to.
Okay.
But I know that some of the property owners, that particular property owner wants to have another one come in pretty soon. That's why it's only limited to 2 trucks per property also,
Yeah.
unless there's a special event. So
Is there, sorry, I was thinking I was paying attention, but was there any mention of, if it's an additional service into what the business is already doing, wouldn't that require potentially some additional parking? So it wouldn't, not that they need to add parking, but if he puts 2 food trucks in that lot, there's nowhere to park, right? And then you're gonna have people stopping on the streets potentially in a pretty,
So that's
is there
why it
some
has,
incorporation there?
so that it has to be accompanied with a site plan to show the parking and everything else, that how they're gonna flow, the traffic flow is gonna go. That's part of it also, exactly.
And so Martin kind of hit on the other thought that I had was just, it seems like Brewster's is a pretty popular thing, and I would want to, would it be worthwhile maybe having a total hours a week instead of total days? If Brewster's only coming a couple hours in the evenings during the summer, to be able to do 5 days if you didn't.
Possibly. I mean, this is all up for discussion. We
Yeah.
try to just put some basic parameters out there.
Never been to Brewster's, I don't know if,
No, I
how
haven't
often
either.
they're
I
there,
don't
so. But I know people are pretty excited when he comes, so.
I mean, the issue the genesis of this is all the food trucks you see out there are illegal right now because you're not allowed to do this in the zone. Okay, so it comes back to zoning is here. And so you either change the zoning law or you try to make them get special exceptions, which is a zoning procedure, but we don't really have the right thing. And the goal, if you take all the books and throw them away, is what about the safety? What about the neighbors? What about the community? You know, everybody likes to go get their ice cream, maybe unless you live next door. And so the idea was zoning's kind of onerous and expensive, and it takes a while to have a hearing and everything like that. So maybe we can have an administrative process that does the same thing. And since they're temporary in nature, you know, if they're playing loud music and people are loud and leaving trash, somebody complains to the town, we say, hey, your permit's pulled. It doesn't get into the judicial aspects of trying to do that. And that's the issue. I think this will meet your needs because the community, it's an asset to the community. But the other side we're trying to balance is it does, in my other jurisdictions, the restaurants really did not like it because they pay property tax and they pay inspections and they do all the brick and mortar stuff that is part of the community. And then you have somebody who comes in who does still some stuff, but a lot less, who just comes in and leaves. So you wanted to have at least it somewhat of a level playing field.
That makes sense.
So.
And Jay and/or Wade, so like if we vote on this tonight and we implement it and like, you know, all of a sudden there's something we missed or like, you know, something we need to change, we can rewrite it relatively quickly, right? And
So you're doing this as a review function for the Board of Commissioners. So you can say, yeah, I want to think about it. I mean, I don't think you have to do it tonight, but I want
Right.
to think about it and have these things. And then once you guys do it, we're going to write it up as where it goes into the code. I mean, there's a zoning change that has to be made to allow food trucks, and then another chapter about how we're going to implement it. So then if you come up with something else, you can say, all right, at the commissioner level, we're going to talk about it. Plus, there'll be a public hearing on it. I mean, it's a...
yeah.
So, you know, the issue, just so you're clear about how come we responded to it, is people said, you know, these places don't have UNOs. They don't have use and occupancy permits. And so the staff's like, so what should we do? And it's like, that is not the question. It's over here. They don't have zoning authority before you ever get to the use and occupancy issue. So this will solve that problem at one time.
No, that was the part of the other thing in my mind was what other community issues are we seeing with these food trucks? Is there any other complaints other than wanting to level the playing field? Any
So Montgomery County is also asking them for a zoning certificate. So they've both been in here looking for it. And we actually have them, some of the ball fields, like when PAA does their tournaments, they'll get a food truck out there and there's no, you know, permitting authority to allow them to do that. So it's just a whole lot of holes in it, basically.
Can we, I heard you say that we can pull a permit for, you know, if we decide that,
It'd be like the health department coming by, you know, one of my clients had the health department stop by and they had some problem with the chicken. I mean, you know, some issue, and they said, you're not allowed to serve anymore until you get your stuff figured out. So it would be like that if we'd say, hey, you know, there's trash blowing in the neighbor's yard and they call the town, say
Well,
that you gotta do something different about it.
what about something like the scenario where the guy across the street that owns the shopping center where Essence Studios is and everything decides he wants to have a Mexican food truck come and it's okay if he parks in his lot and Mexican Grill is right there, and we don't want to, like, you know, sabotage Mexican Grill.
That's why it says it has to be compatible with the site, with the
Okay,
property.
good.
It says it in here,
Perfect.
yep.
Good.
Exactly, I wrote that in
Yeah,
there.
yeah, 'cause I don't want to like take away from,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
if it's contributing, like Tony's Barbecue kind of is like a nice addition, then that's great, but I don't want a taco stand in front of
You
a
may
Mexican
get
Grill.
pushed, I
ideally.
mean, in all the towns that I had, there's only two big issues, aside from the little ones of operation, is that the current restaurants do not like that competition because it becomes, if you had an ice cream stand in town, they wouldn't like Brewster's. I mean, that'd be that. And then the other one, it works so well that the government wants to steal the idea. And so that's when they create the food truck parks on town land, saying you can't do it anywhere else, we're gonna set it up here and you're gonna pay rent, and then the government, you know, it's like organized crime, the government takes over, so. And that's what we wanted to stop, is we didn't want somebody to take private property and create a food truck park
Right.
under this.
Maybe we could do it in the Wheeler
You-
Commons.
Right, you could do it under zoning maybe, but
Those 25 spaces, you have 25 food trucks.
that would be the issue, exactly, we don't want to have, so.
It's a nightmare.
So the way this is written at the moment, that would mean that, every week the food trucks would have to move, because it does say that max on-site 4 days, which means that Brewster's will no longer be able to park 7 days a week. I know that they're not open, and same thing with Tony's, that they would not be parking there 7 days a week. There would be times when those lots are open. Is that correct?
Correct. That's the intent.
And
yes.
is that's per permit? Could feasibly, would somebody be able to get, would Tony's could get a permit, or is that permit going to the landowner?
It goes to the permittee, but the landowner has to sign off on it.
So could, the question would be, could he have potentially a food truck there every day? Just two different food trucks, one there for 3 days, one there for 4.
I guess technically he could.
And is that an issue?
We may want to limit it, have not only the permittee have problems, but also the host,
Yeah.
whatever we want to call them, so. But the idea of moving them was incorporated because, let's say I don't want to have a food truck anymore, I'm just going to bring a Connex box, a container in here, and I'm going to outfit it, and it's going to sit there, and it's never going to move. Like you see like along the road in Hawaii or something like that, and that's still a food truck in somebody's mind, but now it's just really a fixture to the property, so, like a mobile home, it's got to have wheels, even if you don't pull it, I guess.
I have a few questions or a comment. I liked Brian's thought of potentially doing it hours per week versus days per week. Like I'm thinking about that 6-hour time frame. If Tony's wanted to do lunch and dinner on Saturday, you can't. You can do, it could be 12 to 6, but really like 11 to 7 would kind of be dinner, right? So like if it was determined by hours, they could do that maybe on Saturday and Sunday only offer lunch or something.
Or you can set days, times for certain days.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Additionally, I feel like the Mexican Grill has a food truck that doesn't service here, but they park it there to load and unload. And it's in a parking space, which appears to it appears like it wouldn't work with, I don't know, said here on E. Trucks can be parked in no location no more than 4 days a week, and also there was another one. Something about not parking in a parking space, but it is parked in a parking space at their restaurant overnight, but
we
during.
presume that that's like a food truck that's actually actively serving, maybe?
That was the intent, but these are good points that we're having.
I've seen that there, and I don't know how frequently it's there, but I do feel like they load food and they leave. They're not in the community.
No, they have a catering service, and that's what they do. You're right. They cook the foods, load it up, and go away.
So if we
Right.
add language that says like, actively serving or something
Well,
like that?
I think that we want to try to examine it to make sure it doesn't catch that, because that wasn't the intent. It was the
Right.
idea is if you're operating a food truck,
Right.
you
Right.
are permitted.
I assumed that wasn't the intent, but it feels like right now it falls under that, and
Yeah.
it could be a problem
So
for them.
We'd have to define like what operating.
Right.
Yeah.
Serving it out of or something like that.
I'm just looking through my notes real quick.
And so, I guess I kind of asked this before, but if we had a food truck come and they wanted to set up where, it doesn't matter wherever, and they were very directly in competition with something that was a business that was already here, and we kind of cringe about it, are we gonna just free market it and say, well, or,
I think you're gonna have to. I mean, unless there's some like, I'm gonna be right in front of the ice cream place and do
Right.
ice cream more, I don't think you're gonna be able to discriminate against what it is.
well, I hadn't really even thought about your whole thing with like, bricks and mortar people are paying a lot of other like, inconvenience fees or whatever, like, and a food truck just hops in and like starts serving food. I mean, like, should there be a permit fee or something like that, like in order to make it more competitive?
One of my towns did that. Now, permit fees have to be related to the service or the charge we provide. There can't be a tax on that.
Right.
So, arguably, they pay tax on the vehicle to the state. Somewhere along the line, they're paying something to the government, but not to us.
Right.
This is gonna have
It will have a fee. We're not even to that point yet, but yeah, there will be a
I
fee.
mean, I don't want to gouge anyone or just charge money for charging money, but what I do want to do is try to make it more of a level playing field for I don't want to screw our businesses that are already here, and have invested a lot in the community, and like, I don't want them to like take a hit or something if somebody opens a directly competitive food truck.
Right.
That's all I'm thinking of.
You don't, you get property tax, so businesses that are here, bricks and mortar, you're getting somehow a piece of that. And you get emissions and amusement taxes, so that's not gonna come from a food truck. So there, and you get a piece of the income tax, but that's for residents that live here. That's not for the truck that generates business here. So you're never gonna capture a revenue stream. I guess you're looking at this as, it's a benefit to the community. It provides something for people to come here, and I can get ice cream when I'll ride my bike from the C&O Canal here to do this or something. So one of those types.
That's why it'd be nice to be able to pick and choose, you know, like if it's like a food truck that's not competitive, like, you know, I see Tony's Barbecue, he doesn't seem to be directly competitive with anybody, but again, I get back to the whole thing, you know, if a taco truck is parked somewhere and like, you know, selling Mexican stuff, like, that kind of stinks for Mexican Grill. I don't know. But it's hard to say, you know, we can pick and choose, I guess. That's not like realistic either.
The towns that did that created their own. Then they were landlords. Then they could pick and choose. But
Right.
here, it's a private entity saying, I want to put this on my property. Now what are you going to do? I mean, it's like if you meet these criteria, you can be there. It still has to fit the character of the neighborhood. When I saw that language, I didn't see it as what they're serving. I saw it as like, if it's in the corner with some houses and everybody's gonna make noise in the backyard, like that kind of character,
Right.
like how it fits in the operation, not what
Should
you're
we
eating.
consider something about like, you know, being directly competitive with pre-existing businesses?
So I read it the other way. I thought just the opposite of you. I thought it was exactly what you're thinking. Yes, I think it's not compatible to have a Mexican food truck next to Dunkin' Donuts there, right across, in between the two, right? So they would be turned down in my mind. Well, they did
It becomes like, what about if they wanted to go with Tony Barbecue? Is that okay? Like,
I think it would be, because what if Mr. Goldberg wanted just to build a Mexican restaurant right there? What's stopping him to do that? So that's where I see the difference.
So, and remember, like, if the food truck's gonna be over there, it's because the landowner agreed to it,
right.
which is the landlord for the other Mexican restaurants. So there are usually clauses in there, like, you know, you can't have another Mexican restaurant, or maybe even
Right.
another restaurant would
Right.
compete. So that's my concern, was that, well, what if I wanna open the taco truck at the gas station? That's still competitive, but, you know, so at what point in time do you draw the line? And this was intended to be completely staff done.
Right.
No planning commission, no, it was like this, you meet checklists. If you start to get into discretionary stuff, it's not gonna be able to be done by
Well, to your
staff.
point about, you know, Mr. Goldberg can open up a Mexican restaurant just as easily. Well, you know, he could, but like he'd have to do all the things Mexican Grill has to do, like the costs associated with that, like that a food truck doesn't have to, so.
Well, I mean, that, you were using that as an example, and that was the real example, is that the food truck there is instead of building the restaurant, because it's more expensive to do the best restaurant. But the guy, when he first came around, he's like, you know, I eventually would like to move into the bricks and mortar restaurant here, but it's a big cost to get into. That is, you know, people are gonna say, well, you know, if I'm not gonna open a restaurant if you have a lot of food trucks, because I'm not gonna make the investment.
I guess like everything on here that I read over like looks good, except I just worry, my only worry is the competitive thing, you know, like do we want to get involved with like, you know, potentially taking business away from something we already have here? I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that, but
I think you'll hear about it at the hearing when the Chamber of Commerce sees your final proposal. Because if I were a chamber member, I'd be like, hey, you guys are supposed to be protecting my rights, and
Right.
this is not. And then you'll hear about what solutions
I
could
mean, I
be.
do believe in free markets too, so it's sort of like, you know, what I don't know where the right balance is, I guess.
I have another question. Because I've heard you guys explain that compatible with the principal uses taking place on the site kind of differently. I feel like that might need to be a little bit more clear in here. I'm unclear at this moment what that means. What would it mean to be compatible with the principal uses of a site?
We'll do that, because my thought was, if you're running a daycare, and you told me all these things you were gonna do to be safe, because you had to get permission to do it, and now you say, hey, I can put a food truck that sells ice cream, because, yeah, my kids like ice cream, that's not necessarily compatible to bring all this traffic to an area that you didn't want to.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, they were selling ice cream versus burgers, yeah, type of thing.
Okay, so generally it's what's happening as the principal use, which in our town, other than a daycare or a school, which schools couldn't because are they county? That's county property, right? Other than that, you really wouldn't have anything that would be incompatible. Would like a gas station be incompatible? No, because they make their own food anyway, right?
We'll examine that, but, you know, I kind of looked at it as, like if you have a high traffic place that was designed for high traffic, like a gas station, and the park, we talk about parking in residential, but we do that same calculus for others. So I got parking laid out, they came in here, told me we got parking covered and everything like that. Now, they throw in another thing that was never thought of that creates higher traffic, maybe on a corner with parking and screening. It's different. It might not be compatible. An office building, same type of thing. When I looked at it and you told me, hey, it's a dentist's office, we're going to have clients coming in and out, but not that many, but now I'm going to have a food truck, that may change the calculus. It may not be compatible with what you initially had planned. But that's not 100% because even we had
Right.
different thoughts on it. So we got to
To-
examine that again.
In order to address the concerns that I think are legitimate concerns that the chamber is likely to have, I wonder what, and again, I'm thinking out loud, so bear with me, but I wonder if it would make sense to have, like, to limit, like, you know, you can have 3 food trucks in town at one time or something like that, like, the permit system, like, so, you know, and again, this is probably not something we're ever gonna have to deal with, or someone's gonna wanna, you know, we're gonna have 5 or 6 food trucks, but, you know, just to sort of put their mind at ease and, you know, just in case, is there any point in that?
That's like a license. It can be done. It's like a liquor license.
As you say that, I'm
Yeah.
thinking in my mind, well, that could really create some problems right away, because Brewster's could be out there, then locals, once they have a couple of food trucks out there on a special event on a Friday, and all of a sudden you've exceeded your number of trucks in one time.
Yeah, so,
Maybe again, like, I don't even know if that's the right solution, but maybe the way around that is, like, you know, there's special exceptions for events, like, you know, like we have in the Commons, or if locals wanted to do a special exception for like a once in a while, or HMD or something like that, we could have a special exception for that.
I mean, if
I
this
don't
is
know.
successful and you become like the food truck haven, you're not going to want that. You're going to revise this to try to ratchet it down.
Yeah, for sure.
Right now, we're just trying to make the people who are doing it, who came out and did it,
So-
legit kind of thing.
And like we talked about, it can be changed, you know, if it needs to be changed, it can be changed, kind of sort of a living document, yeah, okay.
I 10,000% support like all the food trucks. I love food trucks so much. All the food. Oh my gosh, so many good food trucks. Anyway, so, I'm sorry. I'm now thinking of sweet potatoes. I'm so hungry. So I do agree that like at minimum an administration fee would be appropriate. And administration fees can vary greatly. So that can be however is, you know, that's a decision there. I think that the limiting, I have to agree, I'm not sure Amanda said that, like, you know, it didn't make sense to limit, like, the times, the 6-hour time window doesn't make sense for certain, like, if you're going to serve lunch and dinner. But I do like whoever said that maybe there should be a limit on the days, and I think that was Martin's. And I really have to agree that, like, we have more influx in town maybe on the weekends. So if we limited food trucks to like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and made it like a destination, like, oh, you know, Poolsville is going to have 2 or 3 food trucks. We should go out there, and we should go out to the canal, or we should, you know, like all these bike riders coming through. I know sometimes we have the Java Cruiser that pops up for the motorcycles, like, but it would make more sense to limit maybe the days so that the local businesses don't have any competition during the week.
Right, the only downside to that would be the high school definitely hits Tony's Barbecue, I know, big time at lunchtime, then all the other places are swamped at lunchtime too. That'd be the only thing I could think as far as that goes. I agree, I think on the weekends it should be different, maybe longer hours on the weekends. On the weekdays, I was trying to keep it short on purpose so that it wasn't taking away breakfast, lunch, and dinner potentially from restaurants.
Well, I think if you had like a total number of hours per week, like Brian said, that might kind of, if people wanted to focus their time, lunch and dinner during the week, that would probably eat their hours up relatively quickly versus, you know, you only have 4 days anyway.
I mean, the other thought that I have goes to the hours, and I don't know that you want to get that far into the weeds, but you could have classes of licenses. Like a class 1 allows you to have so many days per week. A class 2 license maybe like, you know, like a pop-up for Tony's. He's only here, you know, for 3 hours on Saturday mornings, whatever morning they're here. But like have a different level because the impact on the community is different. I don't know.
We're going to have to play with it.
Yeah,
I mean,
Yeah.
because, like, I like that idea, but like, and I threw the word license out. Maybe you started it, right? And a license is where you're giving somebody permission for something you have. We're not letting them use any of our stuff. It's a property owner. See, we're giving a permit for somebody to do something, not necessarily a license for them to use our stuff. But I mean, I think it's semantics and we can figure it out. You know, the goal was, we don't want somebody there every day of the week. We want them to move. It wasn't necessarily the hours, it was that, but that was the way to get them to move, you know, was
Right.
that. So let us figure that again.
Again, if you're gonna do an administrative fee, to sort of try to like get them to like have to have some kind of an inconvenience like the bricks and mortars do, you know, but I'm not in favor of just charging a fee for the sake of charging a fee and it just goes to our coffers or whatever. Maybe it could go towards like economic development or something like that, and that would satisfy the chamber and those people, you know, like it goes back towards
I mean, this just takes time to
some
review.
thought.
It takes time to enforce, so you have to pay for the enforcement even if you're perfect, because I have to have somebody drive here now on the weekends to make sure
Yeah.
it's done. When there's a complaint that there's gonna be trash in the street, we're gonna have to pick it up, because they're not gonna go do it. So, I mean, I think you can generate that, but then there's not a lot of discussion here. I mean, they're not gonna pay $5,000, they're not gonna come.
No.
Right.
Okay? And if you're charging them $20, we shouldn't waste any more time talking about it, because it's not, so, you know, there's gonna be a limit, and you just say, okay, it's $100, $150, and I remember when you had your food trucks here for your events, you couldn't get the people to commit, and you weren't charging them anything because they didn't think they were gonna generate enough business to
Yeah.
spend their time here. So you gotta remember that part of the equation, that if there's not a lot of mass, they're not gonna waste their time to come here, so.
I'm just thinking like 3 steps ahead of the parking thing at the Willard, you know, like there's not gonna be any parking problem out of the gate probably, but I just, you know.
She, don't listen to the parking thing, she polluted it for everybody. That's all we're gonna talk about, parking, okay?
There's gonna be a huge issue with parking, especially if you say that there are so many food trucks in front of you.
Exactly. There we go.
They'll be backed up to Rockville.
And it'll be everywhere. There'll be no parking. We'll have to walk everywhere in town, which is totally doable.
That's right.
Okay, I got my marching orders for that to tune it up.
Good discussion.
There was.
That was our last item. If there's nothing else to discuss, that would be the last item on the agenda.
I make a motion we adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor? Have a great night.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.